Is abortion really better than adoption? The left has gone so far in this demonic abortion argument that any resistance to full abortion on demand at any stage causes them to commit to whatever argument is in front of them, however insane it is. In today's episode, we look at New York Times contributor Elizabeth Spiers, self-proclaimed Democratic digital strategist, and she makes the case that abortion is better than adoption because adoption is evil or something like that. Welcome to Church Public. I'm Matt Odegaard. Let's get started. Well, again, welcome back to Church Public. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate it. We have a lot to talk about. This case comes on the heels. Well, really, the processing is still going on. Maybe by the time you watch this, it will be over. But at this point, the Supreme Court is still arguing through Mississippi this case where they're talking about a 15-week abortion ban, and they're trying to figure out the constitutionality of it. And just as a reminder, or if you're interested, why don't you go and read the Constitution right now and see if you can find the word abortion in it. Spoiler alert, it's not in there. This comes from Roe v. Wade, and I've talked about that in the past. I'm not going to go into all of the ins and outs there today, because what I want to talk about from a biblical worldview is this idea that somehow adoption is worse than abortion. That is the case this particular New York Times writer is making. And the point here is not that this is just some fringy person who is saying something, I don't know how else to put it, something demonic, saying that adoption is wrong and abortion is better, killing people is wrong, but letting loving parents have a baby is wronger than killing people. I don't know where to file that. But the point is, this is not fringe. This is mainstream New York Times. And it's not just New York Times. NPR did an article on this. It's going across the nation. I saw an article on NBC. I saw an article in a bunch of different places. It doesn't matter all the places. You can Google this right now and you can see that this is an opinion that is held by many people across this country. And frankly, it's just an insane opinion. And that's what happens when you devote yourself so wholeheartedly to an ideology like killing babies is the right thing to do. You have to jump off the cliff. You have to go all in and say even things like adoption, even things like giving a child to loving parents. And I have a close family member who is looking into adoption right now. This is a real issue. And we'll talk about some details and some stats a little bit later in more detail. But even in this particular case, it was pointed out that there are only about 18 to 20,000 babies available for adoption in America every year, while there are around 1 million babies aborted every year in America. That is such a huge gap. It's unfathomable. It's hard to imagine. And I know, again, even anecdotally, that it's hard to find a baby to adopt in America because there are not enough of them. But it just ultimately breaks my heart that we've created and allowed this culture that says killing babies is better than putting babies up for adoption. And we're going to talk through this article because some of the claims where this person goes are just a crazy place. But again, I thank you for joining in today. Hopefully you appreciate this content. You can go and get more of it at churchpublic.com and Apple Music and Spotify and Google, YouTube, all of the places. You can find and follow me on the social medias. I'm probably most active right now on Instagram because it seems that I've been the least restricted there. But just trying to bring you news and information from a biblical worldview so that we can understand what is going on in this crazy culture. And there is a lot going on in this crazy culture. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. Well, the left has gone crazy, and they've gone crazy for this right to kill babies, that any resistance creates insane responses like the one we're talking about today. Like abortion is better than adoption. It would be better to not be born or to kill a baby than to live in this world. And we'll look at several statements today within the context of biblical worldview, but it has to be said that this is an incredibly sad view of humanity. As I was thinking about this and processing this, that's the thing that I think hurts my heart the most. The 30,000 foot view, the view of culture in general, will start really big and then we'll zoom into this. the view of culture in general is just really sad and depressing for me. And apparently it is for many, many other people. Because this comes from this idea that life, human life, not just babies, but all life, just has no meaning. And that leads to these really depressing places like this one. It comes from this place where you just don't believe that human life has any value or any meaning. And we see that going down to birth, and we see that saying it's a clump of cells or these other things, that a baby's not a baby, and you can just kill a baby with no consequences. We'll talk about that through this article. But you also see it going up into the elderly ages as well, or really in any context where a human is not a perfect specimen of a human, they have less value and therefore apparently can be just discarded and trashed. And that makes me sad. And not just me, it makes God sad. God says that human life has so much value. It's the most valuable thing on the planet because human life is eternal and God wants a relationship with humans. That's the way this whole kingdom of God works. And Jesus over and over and over again talks about the poor and the needy and the troubled. And specifically, as we'll see near the end of this, so do stick around to the end, we're going to tie it into some Bible on orphans and fatherless and adoption and things like that. But it's really important to remember this because this world has no value. This culture has no value for people they deem less valuable or less worthy or less human or whatever it is. And that is a really sad state of affairs. That leads us to today. So this comes in the context of the Supreme Court case. I've mentioned it a few times. We're going to continue to follow it because it really is a big case. It really is the biggest case in abortion, maybe ever, maybe at least since the Roe v. Wade, but probably even beyond that. And this is regarding the Mississippi law banning abortion after 15 weeks and includes the possible overturning of Roe v. Wade, which has everybody just losing their minds over. And that's what we're seeing. So what you heard on Wednesday, you probably haven't listened to many of the arguments. I believe this trial you cannot watch, but you can listen to. I believe all of the audio is available. But if you listened to some of Justice Amy Coney Barrett's statements, she gave what I think is a salient point about adoption. Adoption being an option. Adoption being an option for any mother in America at any point. And it's a really, really good option for those that did not practice abstinence and went ahead and got pregnant. And we're going to look again a little bit later. It seems like the left just doesn't know biology or how pregnancy happens, which sounds unbelievable, but we'll get to that in a moment. Sticking with Amy Coney Barrett, she goes on to point out that there are safe haven laws in every state in America where there's no penalty. The safe haven laws, there's no penalty for giving up a baby for any reason. So she asks the question to those that are so in favor of abortion, doesn't that take care of your arguments? I'm paraphrasing. You can go back and listen, or you can read articles about it. I'm paraphrasing her saying, like, doesn't this take care of arguments like this argument about you're forcing people to parent, you're forcing motherhood, it's a hindrance to equal work opportunities for women or mothers or birthing persons, as they like to call them now. She talks about parenting difficulties. That's one of the arguments, or parental obligations or financial concerns. Like, doesn't this safe haven law, the ability to give your baby with no penalties to the mother at any time, you can give your baby as a safe haven across America. Everywhere in America, you can do this. But of course, these arguments that the left has about abortion are just fallacies in themselves. The whole point, of course, here is it's selfishness. I mean, we are all of us selfish creatures, and we'd rather kill somebody than live with the consequences of our actions. You see that all the way back to the beginning with Cain and Abel, and we haven't changed. And now we're left justifying our mistakes, like killing babies on demand. It goes all the way back to Adam and Eve in the garden. Human nature has not changed, and we are not any different. Read through Romans again. I've been spending a lot of time in Romans lately. It's a good place for you to spend time. We just pretend now that we're better, we're more evolved. The left likes to say we're more sophisticated. Actually, only some of us are more sophisticated. Others of us, like me, are just dumb idiots who don't know anything or haven't studied anything. But they are more sophisticated, so they know that they're better, and so they know all of these things are true. I would say, instead, back to Romans, we're all just the same broken people in need of a savior. All right, on to the article by Spiers in the New York Times. Again, she's a Democratic digital strategist, self-proclaimed. She says, or she's talking about, again, Wednesday, the Supreme Court, they heard oral arguments from state attorneys seeking to uphold Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban. She kept getting at one question. Why is abortion necessary when women who do not want to be mothers can simply give their babies up for adoption? End quote. This is where Spiers chimes in. Quote, as an adoptee myself, I'll pause right there for a second. This writer is adopted. So she's talking as an adopted person, and you'll see the argument she makes in just a moment. Continuing on. Quote, I was floored by Justice Barrett's assumption that adoption is an accessible and desirable alternative for women who find themselves unexpectedly pregnant. She, Barrett, may not realize what she's suggesting, that women don't need access to abortion because they can simply go do a thing that is infinitely more difficult, expensive, dangerous, and potentially traumatic than terminating a pregnancy during its early stages. End quote. Oh my goodness, I just have to stop there for a second, because this is where the train just goes off the tracks and over a cliff. This person, who is an adoptee herself, argues that adoption is infinitely more difficult, expensive, dangerous, traumatic than terminating a pregnancy, which, again, if you're following along, terminating a pregnancy, euphemism for killing a baby. So, adopting, putting your baby up for adoption, where, like this person, who you will find out later, says they grew up in a loving household, is worse than killing a baby. And you being killed and not having life because you're dead. But that's not as bad as being adopted potentially into a loving home. I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say here. So hopefully you can see what's happening. We'll continue on. She says, quote, as an adoptive mother herself, Justice Barrett should have some inkling of the complexities of adoption and the toll it can inflict on children as well as birth mothers, end quote. I don't disagree with that. Adoption can be a bad situation. Adoption can lead, it might not work. It may lead to foster homes. We're going to look at the Bible in a moment and look at how that's why Christians are so called, from Deuteronomy up through almost the end of the whole Bible. We're called to take care of orphans over and over and over and over again, because it can be really traumatic. It's really bad when orphans are not cared for. True. The question in this article, I've got to keep coming back to the main thing, keep the main thing the main thing. Is that worse than being killed for no reason? Again, I'm speechless on that. Really? Really? The conclusion is some kids who are adopted or have to grow up in foster homes have a hard time. True. I agree. But the conclusion is that's worse than being killed for no reason. I don't know what planet this comes from. I cannot understand. But that goes back to my first statement. You get out so far ahead of yourself when you say that abortion has to be on demand at all times up until the point of birth, period, no conditions. When you argue so hard for a thing that clearly has no argument for it, you end up in these crazy arguments where you're saying adoption is worse than abortion. She goes on to say, quote, I had a wonderful childhood, and I believe she, talking about the birth mother, made the right decision, end quote. This is the writer of the article. Oh my gosh, I'm losing it. The writer of the article here, who is adopted, says the childhood was wonderful and the birth mother made the right decision. And yet comes to the conclusion that it would be better if she hadn't been born. I'm just going to keep going because I don't know what to do with this. All right. Quote, both Maria, the birth mother, and my mom, Alice, oppose abortion on religious grounds. These are the two mothers this person has. My mom is white and Southern Baptist. Maria is Hispanic and Pentecostal. Again, I don't know why the races matter in here, but race matters on everything now, so we have to point that out. The writer has to point this out. But you hear both of these mothers, the birth mother, the adopted mother, are religious, and I would say, rightly so, probably understand the value of human life, and are against abortion. Again, we still get back to the same conclusion. I'm just going to keep going on because I think you're starting to get the point. Spiers says, quote, the right likes to suggest abortion is a traumatic experience for women. Okay, I have to stop there again. Yeah, it is. It is. And those who don't agree that it is are lying. I don't know. There's no softer way I can put that. And hear me correctly. If you have had an abortion, been affected by an abortion, it is traumatic. And my heart breaks for you. I cannot imagine, because I've not been through that, how traumatic that really is. That's where I stand on this. That's where I believe most Christians and believers stand on this. We feel terrible for the mothers that have to deal with this. The left is saying, her argument here is, it's not a traumatic experience. That abortion is not traumatic. That's the crazy position here. That abortion for the mother is not traumatic is a crazy position. How can? And again, this gets back to this fallacy, this euphemism, this idea that we pretend in this culture that a baby in utero is not a baby. It's just a clump of cells. It's just you'll hear from this writer later. She calls it an alien. She calls it all these other things. We pretend that it's not real, but I've been around pregnant people many times in my life. You probably have too. You may have been a pregnant woman. I'm going to say pregnant woman, though these articles say pregnant people, because now pregnant men can get pregnant too. Side issue. We'll talk about that another time. Every mother knows their baby is a baby. Everyone. There is no question here. The lie that it's something else, something different, is a lie. It's just a lie. It's just avoiding the truth. It's just a way to escape reality. It's not real. Every mother knows it's real. Every mother knows it's real. There's no getting around this fact. And you'll hear in a second that even this person believes it, but then tries to not believe it, but then believes it. It is a traumatic experience. So she goes on to say, quote, abortion, the right likes to suggest abortion is a traumatic experience for women, a last resort, a painful memory, but adoption is often just as traumatic as the right thinks abortion is, if not more so. Oh my gosh. Again, adoption is more traumatic than abortion. I'm just going to keep going, because you get where this is happening at this point. And again, to back up and see the bigger picture here, it's not just one person saying this. This is the view of the left. This is the view of the entire left. I just read a report today, side issue, that there are more Democratic representatives fleeing the Democrat side, going to the Republican side because of issues like this, because the whole Democratic side has lost their minds on this. And you cannot be in the Democratic Party and not have this view. I'm just telling you that that's the internals of the Democratic Party right now. This is the view. You cannot hold any other view. And I would agree that this is the wrong view, but side issue. So I'm going to drill down on this a little bit more on this particular quote. She says, adoption is just as traumatic as the right thinks abortion is, if not more so. Continues on, as a woman has to relinquish not a lump of cells, but a fully formed baby that she has lived with for 9 months, end quote. In this very quote, again, she makes the point that it's not a lump of cells. It is a baby. Yes, I agree. That's the first thing, maybe the second thing I've agreed with her in this whole article. Yes, a baby is a baby. We need to keep saying this because truth matters, because reality matters, because reality has consequences, and reality will always come out in the end. And the other thing, again, about this quote that I mentioned that is important, it gets to this weird like victim mentality that's all about the mother and completely ignores the fact that a baby is a baby, except for the fact that she says a baby is a baby, and that's where that somehow leads her to adoption being as traumatic as abortion for apparently the mother, maybe. But for sure, one thing is true: adoption is not as traumatic as being murdered. Period. Full stop. Oh, and one more thing. Apparently here, the argument is that a fetus is just a lump of cells, except that's apparently thrown out the window when you have to grow empathy for adopting a baby, which is a baby, which of course is a baby and not a lump of cells, even from conception, but everyone already knows this is true. So I'm going to read a couple more quotes here, and we'll tie it into the Bible. I'm sorry, it's a little bit of a long article, but it's worth reading, and you can go look up this article on the New York Times. Spiers says, quote, "This is one of the paradoxes of pregnancy. Something alien is usurping your body and sapping you of nutrition and energy, but you're programmed to gleefully enable it, and you become desperately protective of it. It's kind of biological brainwashing, and this happens whether you want it to be apparent or not." Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. So, yes, in one sense, a baby is alien because it is not the mother. That is the point of what we're talking about. A baby is a baby. It's not the mother. The mother doesn't get to decide what to do with the baby, i.e. kill the baby, because the baby is not the mother. The baby is the baby, which is a human, which this writer agrees with, but then at the same time says it's baby. And then this idea that somehow the baby biologically brainwashes you, the mother, into loving it is just, again, insanity. Or, on the same hand, yes, of course it does, because mothers are programmed with this idea of empathy for their babies because they need it, because babies are a lot of work, and they take everything you have. That's just what they do. So the mother has to be programmed to love it, because otherwise we would end up in this place where we are, where instead of loving it, you just choose to kill it. That's why there's laws against killing your baby once it's born. We all know this, and for some reason we suspend reality when the baby's not yet born, and we think, oh, it's okay because it's not a baby then. No, it's still a baby. We have to keep saying true things to this. And I know I've talked about this topic a lot, but the reason we have to keep talking about it is this is the point of the Democratic Party right now. It really is, that humans are not humans and humans do not have value, and therefore you can do whatever you want as long as you take the power and take the control that you need to take. That's not right, and we cannot allow that. We cannot. We have to say true things, and we have to remember that all humans are valuable according to God, and we have to fight for those that cannot fight for themselves. We're going to look at some verses in a second that God cares for those that cannot care for themselves. But this idea of biological brainwashing by a baby or an alien or a clump of cells, even though we already threw that article or that argument out the window earlier, I think brainwashing is coming from somewhere else. So speaking of brainwashing, Spiers goes on to write, "In my experience," this is a quote, "some on the right believe the trauma adoption inflicts is a consequence of irresponsibility." Side note, yes. I'll continue. "But," she says, "unexpected pregnancy is not a de facto function of bad decision making." Yes, it is. It's like the left doesn't know how babies are made. It's not a mystery. If it is a mystery to you adults who are on the left, I have so many other questions, but this isn't a mystery. She goes on to say, "It can be a failure of contraception, product of rape, mistaken belief that a woman is infertile." They really don't understand how to make babies. I don't know what other conclusion to draw here. It's not a mystery. It shouldn't be a mystery. And of course, there's the old "what about rape" fallacy. Let me say, from my perspective, rape is a terrible crime where the person committing it should be prosecuted and probably never released in the community ever again. That's my perspective. It is the worst. It is one of the worst things imaginable, and should be prosecuted more than it is now. Way, 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 way more than it is now everywhere in America. Period. However, as we have talked about again and again, one crime does not allow another. Go back and listen to the episode on crime and punishment and an eye for an eye. Maybe you'll find some interesting philosophical and theological issues there. You don't get to kill another innocent person because a crime was committed against you. However heinous that crime is, that doesn't say Now, because someone committed a crime against you, you get to go kill an innocent person. That's insanity. It should be obvious, but for whatever reason, this is not obvious. And their conclusion is, if a crime was committed against you, kill your baby. No. And again, we need to get into a couple of numbers here right before we get to Bible, because though we have been talking about Bible the whole time, but I'm going to quote a couple of specific verses. Coney Barrett makes this point, or actually somebody else made this point, and to refute Amy Coney Barrett's ideas, testimony about adoption and things, and they said that around 18,000 babies a year are available for adoption, and around 1 million babies are aborted a year, trying to say that abortion is preferable or something. But this argument, to me, obviously makes the opposite case. Again, having someone who I know who is looking to adopt now and has no idea what the timeline is going to be because there are not enough babies available. We have created this issue for no reason other than selfishness. There is no reason other than selfishness. It's choosing yourself. It's the mother saying, abortion is less traumatic to me than adoption. That is nothing but a selfish argument. Like, there's no other way to put that. If you think the trauma of knowing that your baby is going to another family is worse than the trauma of knowing that you intentionally killed your baby, again, you're not seeing reality. And that's a terrible way to put it, but we have to see reality here. If you knew that 1 million toddlers were killed in America, you would do something about it. It would be the crime of history, of all of history, if 1 million toddlers were killed. There is not a person on the planet who wouldn't say that's the worst thing I've ever heard. For some reason, when those toddlers are reversed a couple of months and they're in a mother's tummy, it's okay. And this should not be okay. It should not be okay for anyone who has any connection to God. There is no world where this should be okay. And now we're going to get to a little bit of Bible. Beyond all of these other cases for not killing innocent humans, in the comparison, this is important, in the comparison between abortion and adoption, believers should note, that we are adopted as sons and daughters of God. This is a great honor. It apparently is such an important issue that God mentions it many, many, many times as a crucial part of our salvation. He says in Ephesians 1:4, He chose us in him before the creation of the world to be holy and blameless in his sight. In love, he predestined us to, listen, be adopted as his sons through Jesus Christ. That's Ephesians. You can read the same thing in John 1. The true light that gives light to everyone was coming to the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. This is verse 11. He came to that which was his own, and his own did not receive him. Verse 12. Yet to all who receive him, those who believed in his, Jesus' name, he gave the right to become, hear this, children of God. Children born not of natural descent or of human decision or husband's will, but born of God. You can read a similar thing in Romans 8:14, a similar thing in Galatians 4:4, Hebrews 2:10, 2 Corinthians 6:18. Adoption is a huge part of our theology, the way that we live, because God sees us as his sons and daughters. We were born into this world. This world is full of sin. God adopts us back into his family, where we were supposed to be in the beginning, according to the Garden of Eden, and where we will be throughout heaven, throughout the eternity in heaven. We're adopted as sons and daughters of God. This is really important theology, and it's really important to understand, and it's really important to understand in light of this particular situation. It is just an insane position that adoption is worse than abortion. It just is an insane position. But for the believer, it's even a crazier position, because we're adopted into sons and daughters of God. And just as God has loved us, we're supposed to love one another. And this is where it leads into what we are supposed to do. And I'm not going to read all these verses. You can go and look them up. I'll rattle off a few. Deuteronomy 10:18, James 1:27, Hosea 14:3, Psalm 82:3, Psalm 146:9, Psalm 68:5-6. You can rewind that and listen. I know I spoke fast. But those are all verses about caring for orphans, caring for the fatherless, caring for those that do not have parents appropriately anymore. And there's more. That's not even all of them. God is very concerned with us taking care of those who can't take care of themselves, especially orphans, especially instances like adoption. And the left would tell you that has no value, but it does. And it's really important that we lean into this. It's really important that we do what we can do to protect those that cannot protect themselves. This is a really important point. And the left does not want that. They want death because they believe the lie from the devil that their freedom and their salvation comes through death. That's partly true. They just have the wrong death in mind. It does not come from the death of babies. That does not lead to freedom. That leads to slavery. Instead, we need to focus on the one death that does matter, that we did not ask for, and we don't deserve: the death of Jesus Christ. The death of Jesus Christ is what pays for us, is what pays for our salvation, and is what allows us adoption into the kingdom of God. And that is the really good news. And we need to keep coming back to that because that is the most important thing, especially as we're in this particular period of time. So thank you for listening. Go back and re-listen to any of the parts where I spoke too fast. We'll keep coming back to this as more information comes out in the actual trial, but I believe this is an important issue to understand because this is an arguing point and one of the main arguing points the left has as they think about this issue. And it's brutal and it's terrible, and we need to understand what they're really saying when they say things like this. Thank you for listening. Go to churchpublic.com for more episodes. I really hope you enjoy the rest of your day. God bless and keep the faith.